Okay. So, and like I said, you don't end up with a mess of phosphate on the floor. This equipment also cleans it up. They are recycled just like the ATP is. All right, so very well. So let me see. Where do I want to go from here? All right. So what I haven't talked about is how does this actually happen? Or so what are these A to B reactions? Or what is glycolysis? And I want to talk to you a little about it now, and then you guys are going to do some prep work when we'll talk about some more for class next time on this as well. So this is the first part of a multi-enzyme pathway that extracts chemical energy from glucose in the form of ATP. And glucose is a sugar that's found in your blood. It's blood sugar, if you like. It turns out to be a sort of common energy source. So the thing about glycolysis, I don't know what you had to learn about this before and in other classes. Many people are obliged to memorize the steps in glycolysis. That is not worth your time in this class. If you should go on and take organic chemistry, it'll make a ton more sense because you look at it and go, oh, that's an aldol reaction, or oh, that's a phosphate transfer, whatever. In this class, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense because you don't know enough chemistry to appreciate it. So I'm going to try to do big picture stuff, and so when you go on and learn the details in biochem, it'll make more sense. So not because you couldn't get it, but because this is not an organic chemistry class, it's a biology class. So the big picture is what we're concerned about. Is that the glycolysis is part of cellular respiration. And we're going to talk about that in a big way on Friday. And basically food, especially starch, but also protein and sometimes fat by a longer and more circuitous route, gets by digestion and processing, it becomes glucose in your blood. And this is a sugar, C6, bless you, C6H12O6. And glucose in your blood is converted by glycolysis, which is actually 10 steps. If you see it in the book, it's kind of complicated. And there's some ADP and phosphate, which are converted to ATP. So we actually make, in that vernacular, we make some ATP, a few. Gets converted to a molecule called pyruvate, which is going to be really important on Friday. And then there are some other reactions that turn the pyruvate into carbon dioxide and water, and they take in oxygen. Write that a bit more neatly, O2. And they take in a lot of ADP plus phosphates, a lot, this, and make lots of ATP. So, and this reaction happens inside each cell, right? And so, the big picture for all those reactions, it's a bunch of chemical tricks. You could take glucose and react it with oxygen. You can burn glucose. It would burn. Wouldn't do you any good in your body. Make a flame, it would burn you, it wouldn't get you much energy. The sneaky trick your body does is lets that reaction happen. It burns the carbon dioxide and water just like it would if you set it on fire, except it happens at body temperature, and you're able to extract tons of energy out in the form of ATP. That is, glucose burned into carbon dioxide and water is huge negative delta G. And the cell rather cleverly lets that happen. Sure, oxygen, you get to react with glucose. I know you guys really want to get together, but you have to pay the price. Along the way, you're going to have to make me a whole mess of ATP. And then that ATP can get used to move and make proteins, etc. So for thinking about how we want to get a little bit into the details on Friday, as a thing to keep you in mind, when you're taking the quiz and getting ready for lecture, is that each step is small and catalyzed by a particular enzyme. So when you look in the book, it's 10 steps, 10 enzymes, right? And then there's all sorts of other things that have other steps. There are hundreds, so you can get an appreciation for just how many enzymes a cell actually needs, how many different ones a cell needs. The goal is to rearrange glucose to make molecules with weak enough bonds to add phosphate to ATP, to ADP to make ATP. And then the last thing is, and this is actually the really big one, is recycling. The cell has limited amounts of ATP and a molecule called NAD. Let me write that neatly, which we'll hear about a lot more next time, which is actually an electron carrier. Therefore, both must be recycled. Right? So when you're looking at stuff and when we're talking on Friday, you want to keep an eye on the ATP and the NAD because they get used a lot, but there's only a small amount in the cell, so they've got to get turned over. So every time you make it, turn it from one form into another, you've got to find some way to turn it back, otherwise things will come to a halt. In the same way that with ATP, without all that recycling, you'd run out of ATP in about 1/10 of a second. Questions about that? All right, so that's the heads up for Friday. Let's